Welcome to Thursday's devotionals. We're back in the book of Genesis, or we're still there. Genesis chapter 19. We're dealing with the issues of Abraham and the test that he went through, and the story of Lot and the tragedy of his life as he went into Sodom. Just became like a normal Sodom person, took on the values and the morals of Sodom. But God delivered him at the pleading of Abraham from this awful predicament, and God had a great intervention. 3 angels came and restored him out, took him out of the city, and him and his wife. But the tragedy one tragedy just seems to lead to another. As Abraham and his family were told to get out the city, they argued. They said, no, we don't want to go, we'd rather stay here. And then they said, well, if we do have to leave, don't send us out into the hills. We don't know what's going to happen there. Can we go to the city next door? And instead of just grabbing that opportunity for redemption, they began to look at it from all different angles and began to plead different stories in different cases. But in the end, they left. And the angel left them with one last warning, and it was simply this: don't look back. Don't look back. And so eventually, Lot and his wife and the daughters head for the hills, and they heard the fire and the brimstone being rained down upon the city. And Lot's wife just couldn't resist it. She turned around against the instruction of the angel, and she became the proverbial and the real for her pillar of salt. Now there's got to be a great lesson here for us, and there are. The first thing is, you come out of the world as a believer, you commit to follow Christ, and there's always that urge, or that sometimes there's that longing just to have a look back. Don't go back, just have a look back. That's bad enough. I know that we sing that song, No Turning Back, No Turning Back. That's a great song. But it's not about going back, it's just about looking back. Because the look back is very often a look sometimes of regret, that, man, look what I've left behind, and it's a yearning for the things of the past. Just like the children of Israel when they looked back at Egypt from the wilderness, and they were yearning for the things that they had. For goodness sake, they were slaves there, and they were yearning to be slaves again. Doesn't make any sense, but that's the tragedy of human nature. We're drawn back to which is familiar to us, and they wanted to go back to the slavery of Egypt, and they looked back, and they became bitter and twisted. They never got to the promised land. 40 years of wandering around the dryness and the barrenness of the wilderness and the desert, and they never became or achieved what God wanted them to become, because they kept looking back. We look at that with bitterness, and that must have crept into their hearts. They must have looked back and said, oh man, look what God has done, and he's depriving. But maybe they look back and when they got to the Jordan River, and they look back and say, man, we messed up so badly. We're so regretful that we were so disobedient to God. We're so regretful that we didn't listen to him, that we didn't do what he told us to do, that we didn't obey his law. And if only would have been the cry of many of their hearts as they look back with regret of a life that was messed up because they had made the wrong choices. Some look back with yearning, some look back with regret that they never achieved what God would want for them to have achieved. So today, we're faced with a great choice. Don't look back, people, but where are you going to look? My suggestion is look forward. If you can't look back, you may as well look forward, because the front is where the action is. The front is still waiting for you to get there. You can't change the past. If there was any merit to looking back, because maybe we could just change it, you can't change it. It's in the past. And so as you spend your whole time looking over your shoulder to the past with regrets, I have to break the news to you. It's a futile exercise, because you can't change the past, but you can shape the future. And if we will allow the future to determine who we are right now, man, what a different perspective we will have. Bitterness leaves us. Now vision creeps in. Purpose restores itself. Hope is all over this thing as we look to the future, putting the past behind us. I remember mentioning to you just a couple of days ago, I think it was, that beautiful verse that Paul says, where he says, forgetting the past, I strive now toward the high calling in Christ Jesus. You see, people, there is a high calling. And as we strive toward it, the high calling is not in the past. That's a miserable calling. The high calling is in the future. So it doesn't matter how much of a future you have. You could be 90 years old and still turn this thing around, leave the regrets behind and look to the future, because that's where all the action is. That's when hope gets restored. And let's determine to be the best that we can be today for God, not just for ourselves, but for the kingdom, so that the future can determine who we are in the present. It's an exciting possibility. I hope you take it. Let's not get bitter and twisted and end up like a pillar of salt. That's miserable. Nobody wants to hang out with people like that, surely. But people want to hang out with people who are alive and well and focusing on the joy and the hope of the future. I hope you're one of them. Go and have a great day, people, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.